Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. I made several videos now explaining psychopaths being at the root cause of a lot of the problems that we have. I also explained how psychopaths climb higher and higher to ever more power and therefore always tend to capture our organizations. And the last video I made was about how to recognize psychopaths. Today I would like to talk about what to do about psychopaths, or rather how to fight them. Because ultimately we have to disable their power, we have to ultimately remove them from our organizations, or certainly from the key positions within our organizations, and get normal people back in power. But the question is what to do in the first instance. To actually remove psychopaths from key positions of power takes some organization, and this is something that one can achieve down the line when a lot of people have come on board and actually recognized the psychopath. But the question that arises first is, if you have recognized a psychopath yourself and you want to communicate it to other people, or you want to initiate measures against, sorry, that's from my old days in physics, measures against a psychopath, how to go about it, what to do first. And there are certain things that that you can do and that target specifically the weaknesses of psychopaths. And those things go pretty much at the heart of what psychopaths actually are. And if you remember, I described psychopaths as people who utterly lack empathy. They will isolate victims and so on, and they will try to control victims. They really like control and power. So if we think about what can we do that's specifically targeted at people who thrive on power, who thrive on isolating others, and who don't have any empathy and don't understand how people can have empathy, well, the answer almost jumps out from the page. Because if you just write down these characteristics and try to invert them, the answer is pretty clear already. You have to become an anti-psychopath in a sense. So psychopaths do not feel empathy. And that at first seems like a competitive advantage, because they can do things that most of us shy away from. And therefore, if you are up against a psychopath and you care about everybody else around you, for example, in a company, you're competing with a psychopath, he or she only thinks about himself or herself, but you might be thinking about your team. At first glance, it seems like you're severely disadvantaged. It's like playing golf against somebody and you have handicap 18 and the other person is just, if you have to be really good, you have to compensate for this handicap, in inverted commas, that you have. But of course, empathy is not a handicap. If it were, then evolution would have eradicated it from our society, but it has not. 99% of us do feel empathy and we respond to empathy. So what it tells us, and evolution tells us that empathy is actually the most important ingredient in our society. This is what holds society together. So to actually think about this 1% of psychopaths, invert it and think, what nature tells you is that even though psychopaths at first seem like they have this amazing advantage because they can just not care and do whatever they like and therefore be really fast, it's actually not an advantage at all. In other words, nature tells us that our society traditionally cannot stomach more than 1% psychopaths without, collapsing. If there could be more than 1% of psychopaths in the general population, then there would have been already, but there isn't. And there's a very, very strong reason for that. And that's because, and you can also again show this using systems analysis, empathy is the most powerful ingredient we have in our society. It really is. Because this is how you can club together with others, and instead of just kicking them down, so a psychopath comes in at a certain level of skill or whatever, and then kicks everybody down to be below him. Well, this means that a system like that can never rise beyond that psychopath. Instead, when you've got people with empathy, they'll come in, they'll find someone who's lower than them and try to help them up. And then in another situation, this person might be better. And then if they continually help each other, then you get this rise, this overall increase in whatever you're looking at, wealth, stability, products, cooperation, getting stuff done. So empathy, mathematically in a system, or cooperation and helping each other is the most powerful ingredient, actually. So if you want to fight a psychopath, you invert everything that a psychopath does. If a psychopath has no empathy, you have to have empathy for absolutely everybody. And why? It's because if you have empathy with somebody who needs it, they will respond. And it's almost like, I think there was a famous hostage negotiator, an Italian guy whose name right now escapes me. But he said when he was negotiating, he said that what he does and what he describes, he said, you always give first before you ask for something back. And he used to say that to the people he negotiated with. He said, well, I always pay in advance. You know, so you open yourself up first. First you give empathy and help to somebody, and then, you know, they will naturally respond. So if you want to fight psychopaths, you have to empathize with absolutely everybody, and you have to try to help everybody. And, you know, there's also a practical reason, because if you do that, not only do you help a lot of people, because even if you have a problem, you still have the capability to help other people many other ways that are not a problem for you. So you can give another capacity that have nothing to do with your problem. And if you think about how many people in need there are and how many different ways you still might be able to help them, you realize that there's this multiplication factor in that. But on the other hand also, you never know in advance who might be able to lend you a helping hand, who might be in a position to actually give you what you need the most. And this is why empathy is just so incredibly powerful. It helps to heal a society, it helps to solve problems, and it helps everybody to get further. So empathy is the most important ingredient. And if anything, I would say that psychopaths have survived because our societies were differently structured over millennia. But now we're entering a new phase, and if you get this right, life for psychopaths should become harder than it ever was. They will have to adapt a lot more than they had in the past. And I think that's now actually happening. But we're in this transit phase where we are up against a lot of psychopaths, and before a system cycles, you kind of, you know, the system has to drop down first, and then it topples over and moves to a new phase. So this is what we're in. So right now we have a lot of problems with psychopaths, exactly because we are cycling to a new phase. In a sense, we discover the fundamental deep flaws in our systems, and that's when we move and go to something else. Okay, so first thing, if you want to fight psychopaths, you empathize with everybody. You reach out and try to help everybody. And the other thing is, psychopaths always try to snip communication channels because they know this. Every psychopath knows that he's up against 99 normal people who in principle can gang up and use their empathy to turn on him or her. And they know that very well. This is why so much effort goes into isolating victims. So the most important thing when you're up against psychopaths is to talk to everybody, to network, and to tell everybody what the problem is. Even if not in the first round, everybody's willing to fight a psychopath full on. There are these latent effects where people recognize, oh, there's a problem with this person, and they too will start to back off. So psychopaths will also start losing actual support and has to work to actually maintain that support. And that effect should not be underestimated, really. So this is it. So empathy, you network with everybody, you speak to everybody. Then the other thing is, and this is what this video is actually truly about, the most powerful thing in psychopaths is actually, well, it says it in the word, it's their methods and means of power. And sometimes they have de facto power if they are in a powerful position and they can, they've got statutory rights to, make orders and so on. They will use that power as well. But psychopaths work a lot with soft power. And sometimes they just irradiate or, radiate off power without actually having any. And that's their vulnerability. How do psychopaths do that? Well, it's because they instinctively seek out power, and therefore they instinctively pick up the props of power. Power displays. They will have a lot of power displays. They'll have a very imposing car, black tinted windows, black cars, big cars, you name it. right? It has to convey power and be impressive. They are also, and this is something I got from a psychiatrist who worked with psychopaths quite a bit, and he also learned that from senior psychiatrists who work with psychopaths, and they told him that a telltale feature of psychopaths is their like of wearing suits. Well, not every, if you've got a gang leader, he might be in casual wear if he's not in the, suits and ties sort of business. But otherwise, in terms of white-collar workers or this sort of stuff, right, they will like to wear suits because suits are power. They are the uniform of power. And then they'll try to wear suits that radiate even more power. So very, like stern ties, black suits, and so on. So any sort of, or very expensive suits. So anything that spells power, they will adopt. So liking to wear suits and putting a lot of care into this sort of dominance display, which is what it actually is a telltale sign for clinical psychopaths. So they like to, what they actually do is that they command respect. Okay? And you have to recognize that this is what it is. They try to command respect. So if you're fighting psychopaths, you have to disrespect. You have to actively disrespect. Okay? That's the key. You must not respect them, because that's how they get the extra soft power. You have to essentially carve them down to the nominal power they have and not more. You must take away all the soft power, and therefore you must take away from them the respect that they try to get for free. That's not, they haven't earned it. So disrespect is the absolute key in fighting psychopaths. And then another thing is that I think there are exceptions, but overall the really severe psychopaths who've got an absolute obsession with power, also because they're so compulsive and obsessive, also utterly lack humor, because they take themselves so bloody seriously, right? If you're just obsessed about power, image, then you're not really self-deprecating, are you? That is like kryptonite to your power. So humor and disrespect is essentially like kryptonite to these people. Okay? So today I would like to make a video and practice how to have utter disrespect. And this is very important. Essentially, disrespect and humor are survival tools. And not just survival tools, they are weapons. They are weapons against psychopaths, and you absolutely have to use them at every turn. In a sense, as soon as you catch a whiff of psychopathology, you have to get out the humor and disrespect cannons and shoot that to pieces. Okay? And this is how you win in this war. So, now, what I would like to do is I would like to bring up a couple of examples of actual real-life psychopathic events and totally, utterly ridicule them. And I would like to use also insulting language as well. So what they are trying to do is be very formal language, suits, power, commanding respect, and all that sort of stuff. If you want to deprogram, you have to go literally the opposite, the complete extreme opposite. So I would like to be as disrespectful and as insulting and absolutely, humiliating to them as I possibly can be as an exercise. And this has to become a mindset. Ideally, it becomes a mindset in the entire population. But, if you're fighting psychopaths, you essentially have to, be twice as disrespectful as everybody else around you, because you're the lead fighter, right? You're the lead combatant in this battle. So you have to learn disrespect, you have to learn humor, and you have to also adopt a language, and you can switch. You can be very formal and very informal and insulting. And it's okay. In this battle, it's okay. It's essentially they are using dirty tactics, so you can use dirty tactics. No one says you have to stick to the Oxford English Dictionary, right? But you have to make it funny. Because if it sounds like you're actually upset, that triggers arousal in them. So if you actually disrespect them, you have to mock them into the ground. And if you use language, it has to be to really convey how utterly worthless this all is. Okay? So in this video, I will use, the most humiliating and insulting language I possibly can. And I should warn you also, because I am essentially from Generation Y, as in, why the fuck should we give these wankers any sort of respect? So swearing to me comes quite naturally. Also, I'm of Hungarian heritage, and Transylvania, where I come from, people actually swear quite a lot. It's part of the language. We use it like punctuation. We essentially use it to express how passionately we feel about a topic. If you're really passionate about something and you don't swear, it's like you're not taking it seriously, It's like, so this is where I'm coming from. So if I'm if I'm using 4-letter words, it's, not because I can't do any better. It's because I'm expressing just how little respect I have for this topic and just how passionately I feel about that. And I also realize that actually in the UK by now, swearing, and certainly people my generation, has become fashionable. So it's not really a problem. However, as I understand, in the US, you're still very conservative in this topic. I mean, in a sense, you have, guns, and 16-year-olds can run around with guns, but they can't really, drink. And so anything to do with sex is like, or swearing is like, oh my God, but running around with an Uzi is like, hey, yeah, happens. So we kind of have these cultural differences, and in email correspondence with Americans beforehand, I had to, they did take offense at my language, and I just used normal British English that people my generation would use, and they thought it was offensive. And what I did to explain to them that, there might be cultural difference is to point them to a video, and it's the first link below, which was essentially 4 British comedians, taking the piss, if you allow me, the phrasing, taking the piss out of the fact that the young generation talks like that. And it's so common now in Britain that on Red Nose Day, one of the charity events, these comedians got together and they made an actual sketch of Second World War RAF pilots talking like people would talk these days on the streets of London if they're my age or younger. And it's hilarious. So in Britain, this is okay now. If you're in America, then you might find it disconcerting. Then again, if you're watching this video, it's about people being, mutilated and tortured to death by the intelligence agency. So swearing is not really the most horrific thing you might hear in these sorts of videos. So this is to explain. So now let's launch into the exercises, and I want to tackle actual real life situations and show you, highlight essentially the subtle psychopathology there, and then utterly demolish it by essentially just disrespecting it totally. The first example I would like to bring up is essentially the situation when it was Edward Snowden's leaks, the Snowden files that had been passed to the Guardian newspaper, and then essentially all the spy agencies wanted it back. So the CIA was really up in arms, and and then eventually these GCHQ people turned up at the Guardian office and essentially demanded that data back, and then demanded the data, and then what the journalists did is essentially destroy the hard drives because they were bullied into it. And the entire episode is very, very strange. I mean, I must say, okay, open brackets, to me it's so much bullcrap. It's essentially staged, right? It was like a gimmicky little thing. If it's reported in the Guardian, come on, right? Everybody knows. It's like all the major newspapers are essentially the MI5 newsletter, right? So okay, so you put in a big spectacle about, these hard drives and how your journalists destroyed the hard drives and make it like, whoa, show. Okay, all right, so that is a caveat, right? I don't trust anything I read in the mainstream papers by now, because they refuse to report about their own citizens being mutilated and maimed by the intelligence agencies over a number of years for no good reason. So, how much truthful content could there be? Fuck them. Anyway, right? This is already the caveat. This is already totally disrespecting the bloody Guardian. But anyway, taking that aside, let's now take this article on face value if it was actually real, this article, which we can't check and we can't trust them anymore. But let's just say, right? Let's assume that what these journalists have reported actually did happen the way they did. And let's just walk through that. Is there anything strange in the report? I have linked, there are 2 Guardian articles I shall refer to, and I linked them in the order that I'm referring them to. Both of them from the Guardian, given that it was the Guardian that was raided, we can take, their word first about what actually happened. In the first article, this entire episode is described as follows. 2 GCHQ technical experts, Ian and Chris, recorded the process on their iPhones. Afterwards, they headed back to GCHQ's donut-shaped HQ in Cheltenham, carrying presents for family members bought on their rare visit to the capital. Okay. It was purely a symbolic act, Johnson said. We knew that. GCHQ knew that, and the government knew that. He added, it was the most surreal event I have witnessed in British journalism. Okay, so this is now, this symbolic act of destroying the hard drives, and these 2 GCHQ technical experts, Ian and Chris, are there, right? Okay, right. So Ian and Chris are standing around, and in another article by the Guardian, which actually precedes this. The first article I quote was from the 31st of January 2014, if I am right. Yes, and. And was written by Luke Harding. I actually met the guy. I've got another thing to say about that. But anyway, the other article from 2013, 19th August 2013, describes the scene now as follows. It starts, the paragraph starts. The man was unmoved. I think this is one of the GCHQ technical experts. And so one of the most bizarre moments in the Guardian's long history occurred, with 2 GCHQ security experts overseeing the destruction of hard drives in the Guardian's basement, just to make sure there was nothing in the mangled bits of metal which could possibly be of any interest to passing Chinese agents. Like you have, Chinese agents just parading through the Guardian offices, like, through Victoria's, station. But anyway, and then, we can call off the black helicopters, joked one, as we swept up the remains of a MacBook Pro. Whitehall was satisfied, but it felt like a peculiarly pointless piece of symbolism that understood nothing about the digital age. Okay, on and on it goes. So now let's just think this through, this scene. So we have these Snowden files dumped off at the Guardian journalists' place or in their accounts, and then 2 guys turn up from GCHQ, 2 technical experts, right? And then they are there, they are standing, watching how the journalists are demolishing the computers, and they are there to supervise that these computers have indeed been destroyed. Okay, and then as these guys named Ian and Chris are standing there, one of them remarks, "We can call off the black helicopters." Hey? Black helicopters? Let's just think about that for a moment. We have essentially journalists destroying the hard drives, which is kind of like freakish, because I have read several accounts of this, and some accounts made it sound like more like a Gestapo event than, this one, where essentially these people just stormed the Guardian office. But then again, the Guardian writes for MI5 anyway, so it couldn't have been that traumatic. But still, given that this was quoted in the newspaper, let's just assume that this quote actually happened. We can call off the black helicopters? Is that a bit psychopathic, like a power game? Is that frilly? You know how in my previous video I talked about anything that's frilly and it's not actually part of normal policing, normal national security, is bound to be psychopathic nonsense. we can call off the black helicopters. Like, what does it imply? Does it imply like violence? I mean, what's going to happen? You literally have British agents murdering British journalists with helicopters, black helicopters being probably military helicopters. If something doesn't go to plan, would that somehow be actually murder? Would that be like illegal? Would that be like a crime, hey, even in Britain? So, what? What exactly is that, Ian and Chris? Hey? You know? I mean, think it through, what it actually implies if that sentence was ever uttered by these jokers. The black helicopters. Ooh, right? What now? GCHQs have got black helicopters. I mean, I thought MI5 have that shit, but the computer geeks also have like black helicopters or what? You know? Hey? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. But it certainly is not normal, right? It's not normal national security, right? I mean, why would you ever say that? Doesn't it sound like some people like having a bit of a power game? Hey? Because my first reaction would be literally just standing there and go like, hey guys, take it easy or you end up sore. I mean, what sort of nut job comment is it? But this is exactly what it is, right? It is psychopathic. It's a power game. You essentially have these two blokes, Ian and Chris, if they ever, you know, if the situation ever occurred as it was described, standing in the Guardian offices and having a bit of a power wank, right? Because they kind of feel like great about themselves working for, hey, fucking GCHQ. I mean, do you see? So this is essentially what you have to do. You have to break it down. You have to think, isn't that just utterly wank? And I will use this word because this is essentially what it is. It is what a professor I know at Oxford calls essentially filleting their own egos. And I find this term extremely apt. This is essentially it. It is people having a bit of a psychopathic wank, right, about this. And this is essentially, this is what I'm going to categorize it in. Is it normal? And normal behavior certainly isn't. It's not normal national security to threaten your own journalists with black helicopters, right? I mean, you know, I don't think that people are taken out by black helicopters in the UK yet. That might have changed, but, you know. And then, you know, you have these two guys, Ian and Chris, who essentially must be either weaponized morons or proper psychos just standing there, you know, like a bunch of idiots, and then thinking by being two lowly technical experts from GCHQ, they can somehow place themselves above the journalists at The Guardian and make this sort of comment. So the sort of like elevating yourself, aggrandizement and power play, for me, is essentially a psycho wank, right? And I use this term to be as offensive as I possibly can be, and also as accurate as I possibly can be, because this is what it is. Okay, so that's the first example. And then there are beautiful examples everywhere. I mean, you know, I made this joke before, but I'll make it again because I think it's hilarious. But, you know, I went to, when I started being physically mutilated with microwave weapons in January 2016, I researched it online, what's going on, and I heard about the court case or tribunal hearing of Philip Kerr, the case of Philip Kerr versus MI5. And I traveled to London, I watched and I observed the hearing, and afterwards I talked to Philip Kerr. So Philip showed me extensive actual evidence on his mobile phone, including videos and photographs. His partner confirmed it, sitting next to him. And I am 100% convinced that what Philip says is the truth. It's also on his website. If you search online for Philip Kerr versus MI5, you will get through to Philip Kerr's website. I think it's still up, where he states publicly that MI5 have been harassing him with birds being trained to tap at his window. And they used little finches to just fly to his window and keep knocking at his window. It's a very unusual behavior for a bird to fly up to a pane of glass and keep knocking it with its beak, right? And that kept happening over and over. And his partner confirmed it. And then Then what also happened is that these idiots from MI5 started training ravens, right? Really big black ravens, and these little ravens would fly up to the pane of glass at the bedroom or in the hallway and knock at it in the middle of the night, and it would be just scary like hell because these big birds have massive beaks, right? And then essentially they're also black, so you might see a silhouette if you look through the window and you think, oh my god, that's a guy trying to smash the window in, you know, and so on and so on. So it's essentially was an entire like psycho wank created to be as terrifying, like, ooh, you know, scare you. That's what psychopaths like to do. They like to have you scared and stressed and so on. And really what you have to do is like turn on the lights and go like, really? Really? Like, is that the best you can do? You have literally, like, let's just think about this. I find this utterly freaking hilarious because in my case, when I lived in Munich Zolln, literally like a kilometer and a bit away from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, like the German intelligence, these morons trained dogs. So they were harassing me with dogs for some phase. You know, they have these like phases and they have to try something else before they get bored. So it was the doggy phase, as I call it. And, you know, all these dogs started stopping next to me, sitting down next to me, until eventually one dog was trained to lick me between the legs, right? I mean, yay! This is the sort of, you know, mind-fucked bullshit that I can confirm and say under oath that the BND actually does, you know. How fucking degenerate can you be? But anyway, this is what it is. So I certainly understood what Philip Kerr was talking about. In his case, it wasn't dogs, it was finches and ravens. But hey, animal trainers can train anything. And then I just thought about that and just like, let's just lean back, right? And let's have a think what MI5 actually did there. And by the way, if I remember correctly, they used these ravens on his home in Wales and they used it on his home in Thailand. Now, Philip Kerr was making the point, or his partner said, actually these birds were not indigenous to Thailand, the birds that kept knocking on the door. So you think, ravens, big black birds, where might MI5 pick them up? Like, don't they train ravens in the Tower of London or something like that? I could have sworn they trained them there. So it's not really hard to figure out where the F MI5 might pick up a bunch of trained ravens, yeah? But now let's think about it. You have these dudes from MI5 taking the caged birds, putting them on a flight to Thailand, then taking the birds out and then training them, like painstakingly, to knock at Philip Kerr's window at night. And when this happened a couple of times, in the end Philip started to investigate and he looked at his window from the outside and he discovered that there were hundreds of claw marks and hundreds of beak marks on the window pane, even though he only heard this done like 2 or 3 times at night. There were hundreds of beak marks, and of course you understand immediately why that is. It's because the animal trainers had to train the birds over and over to be able to pull it off once or twice when Philip Kerr was in bed late at night to scare him. So let's just think it through and just actually realize how fucking ridiculous it is. You have these dickheads from MI5 flying ravens to fucking Thailand and then training them painstakingly to pull the shit off. Really? Really? And also, it's really good, I found, when you're up against this essentially bullshit from these people, to just take a step back and imagine how on earth these things can, actually be, pulled off in real life. Imagine, these guys from MI5, they must have some sort of like project review sessions or something, right? They've been harassing Philip Kerr for like over 13 years. How fucked in the head is that? But anyway, right, okay, we understand they all just want to have an easy job and, if they do something, they're on a project, they want to continue on that project, and hey, they make friends, and being in Thailand is really nice, right? So I understand why those agents would want to continue doing bullshit for years, right? But let's just think, what about their bosses? What do their bosses think? And is there, within MI5, ever any sort of project assessment, like in normal companies, like at some point the boss actually asks, so hey guys, hey, how's it going? Or something like that. And let's just think, how would this accounting for the birds actually fly in detail, let's just think it through. Imagine, literally, this is an office in MI5, you know, how does that go down, you know? Do you have like, someone comes in, sits down and says, oh, you know, hi Andy, yes, so I am, you know, reading the Kerr case that you've been on for quite some time, and I'm just going through the accounts, Andy. I see that you have asked for quite a lot of equipment over the last couple of weeks. I can see that you had the animal trainers and the ravens, and then also the hang on a second. No. Oh yes, I can see here your request for trained raccoons has been turned down by American colleagues. Thank fuck, one might add. But yeah, Andy, so what exactly do you have to show for it? I mean, does that ever fucking happen with an MI5? Ever? Like, is there any sort of like, okay guys, but do they have project objectives or something like that, or any sort of measurable things, or are they like so before any sort of company innovation or effectiveness drive, efficiency drive, that they just go on doing bullshit? But this is real, people. You have to understand this shit actually happens, and then you have to think through, hang on, how utterly fucked in the head must an organization be to pull that shit off? And not just for 1 year or for half a decade, but for a decade, and then after a decade to continue doing bullshit, right? Because the ravens didn't turn up like the first week Philip Kerr started being harassed. So what the fuck's actually going on within MI5, hey? You know, and also in the BND, by the way, before anyone thinks I've got a particular issue with British intelligence, oh God, no, I've got an issue with all of them. And I can confirm for sure that the BND is just as fucked in the head as they are. But just think it through. Think it always through. How exactly did they pull it off? And what does that imply about the sheer staggering list of morons, weaponized morons, who must have been concatenated and lined up for that to be actually pulled off? I think that's quite telling. But anyway, what it ultimately comes down to is also a very important lesson, because what these idiots within the intelligence agencies are doing, we see over and over in other companies as well. And that's essentially certain processes running out of control. And you have sometimes dozens or maybe even hundreds of people working on something, and no one actually just questions it. You know, I mean, when they're doing this to Philip Kerr, and they're training the ravens, like literally, I don't know, when he's asleep or when he's away, you know, then they are hiding in the bushes, you know, with the whistles to train the birds and call them back and so on. Do none of these guys suddenly have like an epiphany and go, guys, I just thought of something. What the fuck are we actually doing here? Right? Does it ever happen? Do they ever have these WTF moments within, you know, Ceausescu Towers, that they sit at the desk and they're like, what the fuck are we actually doing here? You know? And it's very, very important. In fact, you should always ask yourself this question also if you're working within a company. WTF, what the hell are we doing here? You have to question everything that you do, and you have to take responsibility of, you know, what you're doing. I'm talking to you agents now. So anyway, but another exercise in utter disrespect, and which actually tells one quite a lot, is have a look, for example, because one of the things that you probably know by now is if I put up a video, a lot of the comments that are posted below are actually from agents or from bots. And these agents and bots, there are methods to pick them up, and I know sometimes quite clearly which the bots are. But anyway, I mean, I hope that there's still some normal people posting. So this is not about actually, you know, humiliating the normal people who post normal comments. No. I'm talking about particularly egregious comments. So, for example, there's a way to pick up if you're, and I've posted, for example, on my Twitter page, I've posted instances which I call Spot the Bot. And I literally just took screenshots from my YouTube Creator Studio where the comments are listed chronologically. And what I can see is that sometimes, literally 10 times, the same comment is posted across, 10 different videos of mine, identical comments, and all this will be done within, with a very short time frame, like machine speed, So a normal human being to browse to all these different videos would have to have some minutes doing this. And these things are done by bots, quite clearly, right? Because they just go post, 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 post like a machine, right? Within 1 minute, they post across 10 videos. Well, this is impossible for someone using a keyboard at human speed. So I can pick up these bots. And what is staggering, I mean, aside from the fact that, we can pick them up, what is quite telling is the fact that these bots exist, and that GCHQ and the NSA and all the other digital spy agencies actually put effort into programming these fucking things. I mean, what the hell does that tell us, right? And just look at the comments. There's many wonderful ways that one can really take these bots apart and utterly ridicule the content. But I have to say I have not found one bot posting where I thought, oh my god, that really takes the world further, or this is really insightful comments, or even if it was meant to be a takedown operation, this is a particularly good one. It's all a bit shit, really, I have to say. And then let's just think, because I have definite evidence of these bots posting on my site, right? Given the sensitivity of the topic, and given that these bots would also post about V2K, I don't think these are just commercial troll bots or something. No, these are paid for by the intelligence agencies to discredit people and put out false information. Okay, so it's a given. It's a given that they are somehow linked to GCHQ and the NSA and all these, people. Okay, but then let's just think, how does that actually work in practice when GCHQ, for example, and again, I don't know the name if, the BND has a special digital agency. I would mock them too if I knew the name. So, forgive me that I pick on GCHQ in particular here. But most of the bots write in English, so I'll just, say, for the sake of being consistent, that they're all GCHQ bots. How exactly does it work at GCHQ when you commission these things to be done? Do suddenly, like, two guys come into the office and they say, hi John, so we've got, this is, Colonel Smith here, and, me, we've got a job for you. We would like you to essentially program us some bots, and if you can have them AI enabled, that's, further better. But we want you to essentially write these sophisticated bots, picking out people who are victims of our abuses, and we want you to try to discredit them and post essentially nonsense on their sites as frequently as you can, and keep posting it and keep renaming the bots and so on. Can you do that, John? And this guy would be like, little kid at GCHQ has to pay his student debt. He'll be like, yes sir, no, that can be done. And they're like, oh great John, I guess we've got only one more request. I mean, we know you're pretty good. I mean, you're top first from Cambridge and all that. So, I mean, we trust that you can do a really amazing job. But Colonel Smithy has a special request. Can you, when you make these bots post messages, could you possibly make them sound like a total dickhead? And little John would be like, yeah, sure, sir, that can be done. Right? I mean, if you put that much effort into it, why does it have to be so shit? Right? What does that actually tell us about the entire system? If you look at these bots, they are certainly not normal. It is also not normal to think, oh, they are abuse victims trying to get help, trying to network with others, trying to stop essentially real-life criminality and real-life crimes against humanity. And then we at GCHQ and the NSA, we're going to program bots to spam them with bullshit. Normal national security it certainly is not. So what does that leave us with? Are the people who are writing these bots essentially weaponized morons? Or do we essentially have somewhere high up some psychopaths just essentially getting off on trying to, denigrate every attempt of genuine victims trying to get help? Right? How on earth can this be? And so every single time, I encourage you, in fact, I'm probably going to make an entire video about data analysis on just the shit that I get, that's posted below my videos by the intelligence agencies themselves. I think it's very, very valuable. But just think it through, right? How on earth can this be in a society? And what does that tell us about the utter idiocy of the people who run these organizations? I mean, when you've actually seen that with your own eyes, there is no way to be intimidated by these idiots. It is essentially impossible. They can threaten you with the black helicopters as much as they like. But when you know what sort of crap they actually produce, it's hilarious. So that's essentially it. They've got a totally psychopathic system, yet it is utterly shit at its core. And then also what I think really helps a lot is to actually think about the big picture. Think about the big picture. What do we have? We have essentially the intelligence agencies everywhere in Europe running amok, using military weapons, microwave weapons, brain interference, remote neural monitoring, satellites, powerful emitters that are somehow placed in cars. And what do they do with all this military tech? They go around and they shoot women in the vagina. Wow. Go MI5, go. That's so amazing. And that's what we have. And it's not just myself who's been essentially shot into, primary and secondary sex organs, right? Every single female victim I've come across has reported exactly the same. This is a program where essentially you have a bunch of weaponized morons, because normal at most, most certainly it is not. You've got a bunch of weaponized morons at MI5 being run by a bunch of psychos having a wank. Right? That's what it is. And now let's think about the big picture, because in everything that I post, in everything that they actually even do within the UK, we've got other intelligence agencies monitoring everything that they do, because, the first task of a foreign intelligence agency is to monitor the other intelligence agency, not even to monitor the country, but to monitor the other intelligence agency first. So if anything, we have spy agencies watching other spy agencies first before they even watch us, right? It's like these giants just going rah above your head, and you're like, what the F is this? So we have everything that's being done, and every video that I post is going to be monitored by Chinese intelligence and the KGB. Now, when you have the KGB watching this, they must be utterly wetting themselves laughing. Let's just think it through. What would KGB agents think when they actually realize that this is now public? You have essentially an Oxford graduate begging a Cambridge graduate to finally stop the psychopathic wanking mutilation of her, right? This is what it is. Andrew Parker is a graduate of Cambridge. If you hadn't guessed, someone quite so, out there. So how exactly, what must the KGB agents think? And the way I imagine it, if I was literally there in a foreign country monitoring this, I'd literally be like, going like, what? Alexei, come here. You've got to see it. No, seriously, you've got to see this. You've got to see it. Slava, come here. Oh, come on, forget Chechnya. You've got to see this. Hey, look at this, right? Here. She went to Oxford, right? She worked really hard, and you know what these guys are doing? Like, they're literally shooting her to pieces. like she's been on YouTube like for like almost like half a year now, right? She's complaining about this. It's hilarious. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that would be Parker and Younger, right? I don't know. I mean, but they've been doing that for a long time, right? I mean, you didn't. Yeah, I'm sure. You trained with them, right? I mean, didn't you train with John Scarlett some time before? Right. Yeah. No, they're still at it, right? They're shooting their own scientists to pieces. It's hilarious. It's all on YouTube. Right? This is what I would be like if I were watching this, right? Fucking ridiculous, isn't it? So, essentially, you have to show these psychopaths just total and utter disrespect, and you have to make it absolutely clear that what they're doing is just daft beyond belief, right? Actually, one guy who does that amazingly well, I absolutely love him for that, and that's essentially Russel Brand. And today I've been banging on quite a lot about GCHQ and British intelligence, and I've been bashing them, so now I would like to turn to bash German intelligence, just so that I pull equal. So German intelligence is essentially was refounded, I think 9 years after they shut down the fucking Gestapo, right? So they refounded, they need another Gestapo, but anyway, so we've got the BND being Gestapo 2.0, and yeah, I mean, they really are, based on what they've done to me. But anyway, and essentially they tie in with all the old, SS and Gestapo. SS was the Staatssicherheit, I think, so state security, and Gestapo was the Geheime Staatspolizei, like the secret state police, and so on. These are the acronyms. So anyway, you've got this like intelligence conglomerate, and then Russel Brand does a really amazing routine because, and I'll link it below because it's absolutely priceless. And he essentially the uniforms of the in the Second World War of the SS and I think the Gestapo or whatever, they were essentially made by Hugo Boss. Did you know? And Russel Brand, the UK comedian, was invited for Hugo Boss, and I think, event, and it was co-sponsored with somebody else, and he had to speak, and instead of giving a speech, he did exactly what I'm trying to get across to. He essentially used humor and total disrespect to utterly take the piss out of the entire event and really rip into Hugo Boss for essentially making the uniform of the SS. It's absolutely priceless, because as soon as he started, the entire room that was before just all in awe, that's what psychopaths love. It's like everybody has to be in awe, and it's about suits and and Russel Brand took it absolutely to pieces. It's hilarious, but this is essentially the sort of thing that you have to aim for, and anyway, have a look. The link is below. I really encourage you. It's one of my favorite things by Russel Brand. Anyway, so this is essentially it. This is how you fight them. And there are many other tips, but this is, I think, the most important one, right? You have to absolutely make sure that you don't give these people any sort of respect, and that you use tons of humor to really, annihilate these people. And it is actually quite serious, because we do have these people running amok. We do have them essentially mutilating women. They picked on, as far as I can tell, on vulnerable women, isolated women. In the UK, certainly, but also in Germany, in the UK, they picked ethnic minorities, so a lot of black ladies. In Germany, also foreigners like myself. So essentially, we have these Nazis running around like the Gestapo, doing exactly the same things that the Gestapo did, which is essentially turn on the vulnerable. And I also heard reports of, single mothers who have autistic children, and then the autistic children are harassed and these mothers are harassed. So we are talking very horrific, psychopathic crimes that are totally unnecessary and essentially arise because Alex Younger, head of MI5, head of MI6, Andrew Parker, head of MI5, and Dr. Bruno Kahl, head of the BND, and whoever the head of the Swiss NDB is, because these men essentially can't get their shit together. We have these degenerate psychopaths running amok in the country, and these proud men can't get their fucking act together and can't make these people stop. So the situation is extremely serious. I do not want to detract from that in any way. I am also an abuse victim. I have been abused last night. I have been abused today. You can see the injuries in my face. But just because the situation is really serious doesn't mean we have to give these fuckers any sort of respect, what the hellsoever. If anything, we give the victims all the respect in the world for pulling through this. But we do not give these people any respect. With what has now been uncovered about these crimes, about the voice to skull, the remote mutilation of people with electromagnetic weapons, the enslavement and mutilation and harm to their brain and their mind is a crime against humanity. These are the biggest war crimes we had since the Second World War and since the atrocities in the other wars recently. But it's essentially the biggest crime against humanity in peacetimes, right? That we saw for very, very long time. So the situation is extremely serious, and I want you to understand that. But for all the victims, I say that you deserve all the respect, but they don't. They don't. And if we pay the intelligence agencies even a shred of respect ever again, we haven't understood what these people have done. So this is what this is about, right? Anyway, I don't really want to finish on quite so heavy a note. So on the upside, because there's a bright side on this, the upside of all this debacle, and essentially the intelligence agencies having just exploded. MI5 has now doubled its budget after 2003 and tripled its headcount, which is, truly disastrous. And they're essentially running 2 black agencies. So it is pretty horrific. But there's an upside. If you're, for example, a young man in your late teens or in your 20s in the UK, and you're wondering, you're a bit insecure, and you think, oh my God, am I a total loser? Or, I tell you, you only have to ask yourself one question. Ask yourself, are you on the payroll of MI5? Because if the answer is no, you have nothing to worry about. You're totally awesome, and you shouldn't worry one bit, because I assure you, MI5 have by now hired every last wanker in the land. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.